This is the January 15th, 2025 regular meeting of the Darien Parks and Recreation Commission, calling to order. First, we have two sets of minutes. We did not do the November minutes in December, so we're doing both tonight. Does anybody have, on the November 20th minutes, does anybody have any comments, changes, recommended edits? Everybody's good? Okay, then can I have a motion to approve as presented? Mary Louise, Jim second, all in favor? Excellent. All right, and then next we have the minutes of our December 17th meeting. That was technically a special meeting because we moved the date. And again, any questions, comments, additions, changes, corrections? Nope. Everybody's good? Okay, can I have a motion on those? Jim? Cindy second, all in favor? As always, please thank Tamara for the really great job she does on the minutes. Really good job on the minutes. Which is okay. Button.
I forgot my glasses.
Oh, I can't help you with that.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Next is we're going to have just a discussion tonight. We won't be voting on a request from the Darien Little League. Oh, I skipped. Thank you. I skipped public comment. Do we have any public comment this evening?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Hi.
Please stand, state your name and your address.
Sure. My name is Doug Wilson. I live at 43 Arrowhead Way in Darien, Connecticut. I'm a member of the Darien Junior Football League Board of Directors. I'm also the president of the Blue Wave Booster Club. I'm here representing the entire DJFL Board of Directors tonight in the matter concerning the usage fees for town fields for youth sports. Darien Junior Football League works hard to offer a valuable experience and to the youth families of this town. We have approximately 600 families that participate in both the flag and tackle football program in this town on an annual basis. We strive to keep our fees on the lower end of what families pay in this town, while still providing a full complement of safety-related equipment. We provide helmets, shoulder pads, practice jerseys, and game jerseys to our families, and yet we're still at the lower end of youth sports usage fees. The proposed increase in youth fees for usage of town fields to $45 from $5 just simply does not tick the box for offering value. While true that we pay $45 to use Board of Education fields per player, the value that we derive from using Board of Education fields also includes the usage of lights, turf, restroom facilities during practices as well as during games, concession stands open and available to players as well as parents for selected dates during the season, and field lining and marking. When you compare and contrast this to the value that we derive from using town fields, DJFL pays for our own lights behind Town Hall, which is thousands of dollars of expense that we bear. There is no turf. There is no restroom facilities available to our players during practice times. There's no concessions, and there's no markings of the field. So there's no outline of the football field, down in distance, yardage, or anything of such. So we would ask this board to consider the level of increase that they're discussing. I think when you compare and contrast the value that we receive between the Board of Education fields and the town fields, I think that you'll see that there's a clear difference, and an increase to a level that's equal to the Board of Education fields seems to be arbitrary and capricious in our opinion. Thank you.
Let's stay on the agenda, and we'll address, we just have the one other item before. So we'll go with that.
Speak as well.
Yes. Please state your name and address.
Sure. My name is John Butler. I'm the president of Darien Little League, here representing Darien Little League.
I don't think I can really do any better than my colleague from DJFL with the same objection. Darien Little League pays the town, a significant amount of fees on an annual basis, and we also spend a fair amount of money each year keeping the fields up, and we're also planning to invest, and in the process of investing, gifting the town, hundreds of thousands of dollars to upgrade both the McGuan Fields and Cherry Lawn Park, which presuppose the pre-existing, $5 per head usage fee. It seems counterproductive to suddenly change the fees. That's going to make us rethink the ability of the Darien Little League to sustain a multi-$100,000 investment in upgrading the field. So if the idea here is that we're going to use these fees to upgrade the fields, I'd like to understand how. I think it's actually going to set us back, and is really counterproductive to maintaining really top level fields for the kids who play baseball in town. I would ask that you reconsider increasing the fees, particularly so dramatically relative to what they've done.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you both. We have one other agenda item, and then we will be talking about the fees. Okay, so the next, which is related to Little League, is a discussion related to a request from the Little League to display sponsor banners at McGuan Field for the 2025 season. We got an email request, I would say early December, that came into us specific to this, and it was from Danielle Pacchione, asking about whether that would be possible and what would be involved. Jen and I did check with Jeremy Ginsburg from Planning and Zoning, just to, see what, restrictions might come out of the town. And he more or less said we were fine as long as they weren't visible from the road, it was for a limited period, things of that nature. He gave us the guidelines, but generally said it was really up to the purview of the commission to decide whether we wanted to think about approving this or not. So that's pretty much as Jen and I know. I know, Terry, you were gonna maybe inquire with Little League and get a little more color. I don't know if you have anything to add.
A little bit. Candidly, I was a little bit surprised by it. And my years on the Little League board, that came up several times, and the general view was always not typically in favor of that. So the fact that Darien Little, and so I've been off the Darien Little League board for several years now, so it appears that thinking has changed a bit. I do want to clarify one thing on the request. It was McGuan only, right? They didn't ask about Cherry Lawn?
Yes.
Okay. My question really would have been around, I had thought there were some pretty significant P&Z restrictions from doing that. It sounds like there's not. So I haven't really made myself a student of this. In terms of the purview of this, I've been in a position where both my boys have played a lot of baseball around Fairfield County, and there's a lot of towns that do this. In my personal opinion, none of them look very good when they do it. And so, I guess the question, now, the one thing that flies in the face of that is, it's interesting that Doug's here. The vinyl that they've done at the high school is really, really nice. If you haven't been to see what they did at the high school, like, there is a qualitative, if you do it the right way, you can make it look pretty nice. I guess I'd be interested in what, if Darien Little League needs, if this is a necessary thing for them to continue to raise money, and given that we've actually already heard a little public comment, and I'm trying to keep the cost. I do know that football and baseball are actually two of the leagues in town that go a long way to try to keep their participation fees low. Not every league in town does that. To the extent that that's needed, I'm not sure where our sensibilities about aesthetics versus the rules come in, and, you know, Darien Little League has always operated in great partnership with town, particularly as it relates to McGuan, and, you know, I think we should continue to discuss it.
Okay. I'd just love to kind of get reactions, thoughts, comments, questions from folks. I don't think we're going to vote on this tonight because we're putting it out in the public for the first time, so we would want to get any other public feedback either way before we vote next month. But I just want to get people's, you know, thoughts, questions, concerns out on the table.
Yeah, just two things. Do we know the reason why there's been a change in this line of thinking? If this is the first time they've requested this? And would this be advertising revenue, would this be revenue for them? And if so, do we have an idea how much that would be?
I don't, but since the board chair is here, I suppose we could inquire.
It's fortuitous. It was driven by a couple of different things. I think one of which is trying, and the main reason is to try to raise money. There are a lot of new businesses coming into town. We're in the fortunate position where we have these, you know, long-standing sponsors who've supported, you know, Darien Little League for decades. But we feel a little bit constrained in terms of our ability to find new opportunities for those folks to advertise their businesses and in conjunction with Little League. There's only a certain number of teams we have. So, you know, we can't, you know, name more teams after new businesses, and there are a ton of new businesses coming in town, as you all know. So we have more folks wanting to give us money in conjunction with advertising their businesses, and we're struggling with ways to figure out how to do that effectively. One idea, may not be the only idea, may not be the best idea, was to put up banners around the outfield, you know, hopefully tastefully. I've seen it done the same way Terry has, where it's a little bit clunky. But with some of the new kind of high-end businesses that are coming into town, seeing what football's been able to do at the high school, I think it spurred, you know, an interest in, hey, is that something, you know, we can do to leverage, you know, all the new business activity in town, raise money, keep fees low.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think if it's not cluttered, you know, not a cluttered look, where maybe we can limit the number of signs so that it looks nice. I agree with Terry that they've done a nice job at the high school, but it does look cluttered at the high school. There's a lot of advertising. If we could do that, maybe limit the number of signs. And if it helps them with offsetting some of the costs that they're taking on now with maintaining the fields at McGuan and Cherry Lawn, I think that's a plus.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I mean, if we were doing it, you know, obviously prioritize just Darien businesses. Potentially work in collaboration with us and, you know, maybe beautification committee or somebody like that, where you can set one exact standard for every one of the, set colors, set sizes, set fonts, something like that. You know, where it can look generally universal.
The comment I would make is, it's actually, to me, it's less about, I mean, you don't want it, too much can mean a couple different things. It could be the quantity, but I think what's been done at the high school is a really, really good example of how it's properly done, meaning everything's a similar color, so it's not visual pollution, like, so for example, like, I don't want to pick on search, but a bright white banner with a green banner next to an orange banner, whatever, like, that's not, like, the consistent blue, white consistency of fonts, so that it still feels like a park, as opposed to some, like, visually, you know, and then there's gonna be a lot of sensibilities about that, but right, well, if you want to talk in major league terms, there's only one park that I think that is like, when you look out at Wrigley Field, everything's still green, whereas everything's like sensory overload in every other park in America, and including my Mets.
Would it make sense just to codify what you want and just say these are the standards that we want for these banners, not just in terms of font size and color and all that, the quality of the material, right? You see sometimes these things get ripped or they look terrible, and once they get put up, they don't get maintained. So maybe just write down what you want.
Do we have an idea of how the high school went about? Was it approved by the Board of Ed? Did they have standards they use? Because I agree, I think having the same colors neatly done reduces the amount of clutter and busyness that you would have, but I don't know if anyone here has any information on how the high school went about. Or
wanna be put on the spot again?
standards they use, yeah,
I did it.
This was Doug's operation.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so we made a proposal to the Darien Blue Wave Booster Club. So, point of note, this is the Blue Wave Booster Club that did this project. And we are the team behind all the teams in Darien High School, along with the band and spirit squads and other high school organizations in town, such as Post 53. So the money that's raised from this project benefits all Darien teams, not just football. But the Blue Wave Booster Club made a proposal to the Board of Education. We started with, phase one was rotating signage on the scoreboard. That was done in the spring of 2024. And then we proceeded to the permanent vinyl signage and got school board approval for a certain number of signs that the majority of which will remain up year-round. And so there's three levels. There's the diamond level at the top of the stands, the platinum level at the front of the stands that are larger, and then the gold banners that ring the outer area of the stadium. The school board imposed limitations on sizing. We proposed a uniform color. We call it the US Tennis Open type of format, where every sponsor logo has a uniform color. We allow them to use whatever individual font their business uses for their logo, but it has to be a blue and white color. And then we worked with a vendor out of Wilton, Purple Frog Graphics, that installed the banners in Wilton. So this was a proven concept that we used, and we used the vendors, and we talked extensively to their board and mirrored the materials that they use. So a high quality UV resistant vinyl along with UV resistant fasteners just to extend the life of the product. And then we kind of came to a similar pricing point with Wilton. If you're interested, tune in tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I'll be giving a brief to the Darien Board of Education Finance Committee, and you can pull our presentation. We're also happy to make our presentation available to anybody that wants it, that details the revenue and cost. I think the takeaway is we generated, will generate around $70,000 in top line revenue. Year one is a very cost intensive part of the plan because you're spending all the money on the banners up front. It's, call it mid $30,000 of expense. So year one, nicely profitable, and then years 2 through 5, we expect to be much more profitable than year one. I'm happy to take any questions.
But that would be all, that would all accrue to the Little League.
yeah.
We're just letting them put on, so that's for you guys to figure out. Other questions, Jen, you had some?
Yeah, so I think, I think the point is, I think definitely some sort of standard would need to be determined, right? So that that's being put forward. But I think one of the other things that needs to be thought about is who determines the content and what types of businesses are acceptable. There may be something that, whether it's, I don't know, an alcohol store or something like that, is that appropriate on a ball field? So I think something along those lines, the guidelines or whatever needs to be laid out, and who is that up to? Is that up to the commission? Is it up to Little League or whatever? I think I'm just throwing things out that need to be part of the thought process and considered, because there may, tobacco. It might be, not to call one out, but maybe like a Pall Mall cigarettes or something like that. If they were to have something, does that fit with the mission or kind of?
Well, we could follow.
Feeling that we
Booster
want to-
Club already has something.
So,
they
yeah,
have
I
already in place. We
would
could
be
follow
interested to
those
know,
instructions.
if the Board of Ed kind of laid out some stuff, for guidelines. So I think as long as we have something along along that line, I think it's fine. But I just wanted to put that, because that's, you know, who's gonna be responsible for that, to say like, when people come back
Yeah, I mean,
and say, I can't believe I was at this game and, you know, this banner I saw on the field, so.
all totally sensible. You know, the way that's always gone in Little League as a practical matter is when new sponsors show up, the question is, does this belong on the shirt of a third grader? And those, God, those things are kind of already.
Right, and you might
kind of
already
baked
have
into
that from when you pick your team sponsors and
Correct.
things, so you may
So
already have
they
that.
generally, at least as long as I've been around Darien, they've
Right.
stayed out of, you know, having Chico's bail bonds.
Right,
So,
exactly.
so, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, but other than that, I think is, you know, and maybe that's something we just, whether, maybe the question is, does the commission put forth kind of some guidelines to give to Little League, or is it Little League make a proposal to us similar to what the Blue Wave Booster Club kind of did? I don't know which.
You know,
which way you
there's
wanna do it.
a lot more people that have been around government as long, you know, to me, some lightweight checks, like maybe we give guidance and if it's questionable, come to, like, I don't know that there needs to be a formal approval process for that kind of thing. I mean, I'd be totally comfortable leaving it to the judgment of Little League but maybe with some guidance, but if we want, you know, every new sponsor to be submitted and approved, like, I'm not sure we need that heavy,
No, I'm not
yeah,
saying to come to, I'm saying for the guidelines.
Yeah.
Or, you know, would you want it to come from the commission to Little League, or Little League to make the proposal to us, to the commission as to, you know, the things that you want covered in it? Just like we were talking about the size and, you know, the color and that kind of thing. Because the commission, this is just my opinion, and like, the commission should say, we want, this should be the size, this should be the standard size, this should be the colors that we would find acceptable, or they would propose it and then the commission would accept it. Versus just saying, well, we trust you, go do it. I just think that's, you know, from.
Yeah, I was speaking to who the sponsors are,
Oh, yeah.
issue mostly on
Yeah.
that one, but.
Yeah, no, and I think
think-
it can just be for your
Yeah.
judgment as, use the same criteria you use for your other sponsors
Yeah,
or something.
We're happy to make a we're happy to make a
Yeah.
proposal, especially since it sounds like somebody's done all the work.
Yeah.
So, if,
that might be the
copy
easier
somebody's
way.
homework
Yeah, I
and,
think so.
No,
Just tell them
that's,
what they want.
Right.
we're happy to make a proposal, just guidelines, makes that, you know, all, like, and we need to do some work around that and come up with something that, you know, we think is sensible and appropriate, and, but this feedback, this discussion is, I'm speaking, I should have asked permission, sorry. But, yeah, I mean, if that's makes sense to you all, we'll make a proposal and you can react to it, provide us with feedback, and we can, you know, provide you with guidelines both on types of banners, number, thought process on location, you know, some guidelines on what we think costs and how much revenue we can generate, all the font size stuff and materials, but I think largely we would try to stand on the shoulders of giants and leverage all the work that's already been done, but put something in front of it you can react to and say yes, no, or no, you know, yes, but, and we could go from there. But appreciate you all being so constructive.
Thank you. Just as you're thinking about that, just to reiterate from the P and Z standpoint, when you're thinking of where you would put them, that they can't impact the view of the streetscape, shouldn't be an issue. Only advertising on the outfield fences, so not on the backstops or buildings. Temporary, so only for a maximum of like 7 months a year. We think the March through October, I think, is pretty much your season anyway. That's what they had kind of put forward to be able to stay out of needing to go to P and Z and all that.
Got it.
So.
Well, it sounds like there is a willingness of the commission to consider that, which is really, I think, the first thing we need to get on the table tonight. You know, it is a departure. We're used to having our parks, you know, no advertising, all natural, you know, kind of get away from life's visual clutter. But Aguan in particular it's largely an athletic complex, unlike Cherry or Baker, which is right by the road. Where Cherry services a lot more needs, I think that would be a much harder discussion to have. But I think given McGuan and the location of the fields, sounds like everybody is willing to consider this. Given the timing, I would assume that if you're gonna do this for this season, you need to get on it, because it sounds like there's a fair amount of work to be done, so we want to be voting on it at our February meeting. So we need to turn that pretty quickly. Maybe if I could get a volunteer or two from the commission to, sorry, I'm looking your way. But I can look this way too. Just stay in coordination over the next few weeks and maybe just vet some things and kind of, take a look at the proposal and get it so it's kind of ready for prime time by the next meeting. I think that would be helpful. I know I'd probably want to go out and do a field trip, myself, to really understand locations, get up to the high school. Because you have to go after hours, because you can't go on the property during the day, and just kind of look at that, because I just don't get back there anymore. But just so that we can be kind of buttoned up for the next meeting in terms of what everybody's thinking, I think that would be helpful way than rather just have the Little League come to us, make recommendations, and then we're still back and forth and not ready to vote on it, because then you're kicking it out till March, and I would think that would be getting tight for the Little League in terms of making this an effective program to have them ready for, you start what, in April?
Sorry, April 1st.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Just one thing,
Couple
you
people.
mentioned in your conversation, McWayne is truly an athletic field compared to Cherry Lawn and others, so if we go down this path, which it sounds like we will, and I'm for it, just to consider, at what point do we decide other playing fields get the same kind of consideration versus McWayne? I mean, what's to not say these could go up at Cherry Lawn or others? So I don't know if that's part of this commission or if there's a line, if there's a delineation that needs to be made. Just something to think about.
what would be this commission? It's
Yeah.
absolutely within our
Okay.
authority. I think the request this year specifically for the one park, we may say, let's, try it with one park, and we don't really want to entertain it in others.
Okay.
For
Just
now.
something to keep in mind, yeah.
Let's, let's set the parameters of just Cherry, or just McGuan right now.
Okay.
We'll get into,
Others.
because
Yeah.
Cherry Lawn's a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, okay. That's
Yeah.
what I was, just
I'll head this up.
keep in mind.
Happy to work with you. I'll give you my contact info.
Okay. Great, thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Okay.
So if we get something together in the next 2-3 weeks so that we can circulate it, we can potentially have a vote then on the 12th?
Yeah, our next meeting is February
Okay.
12th, so, yeah, I think ideally that's what we want to do for timing.
Yep.
Is vote to push to our March meeting, which is like,
Yeah, that'd be
And then would
It's like
we
a
want
two-way
to
for-
enter that framework into our rules book, just for prosperity's sake?
I don't know that we'd put it in the rules. I mean, the rules state that any signage has to be specifically approved by the commission. So I think we would have the approval for this program. I don't know that, especially year one, we'd want to update the rules. You could think about that. Maybe first year's more of a trial,
Yeah,
because they could all go up and then, and I'm not saying this would happen, but you could theory then have a lot of public reaction. People are like, whoa, wait a minute.
but I think in time though, if it becomes a thing that's more permanent, we would probably want to just,
Codify.
yes, or memorialize it more, institutionalize it more.
Yeah, I think that's, I think
Just
that's
so we
right,
don't have to
Janet.
redo the work before any other parks or,
Mhm.
Okay, we're good? Okay, so let's move on to the discussion and vote on the 2025 fee schedules in your packet. Jen has more copies here if you.
I'll take one, Jen.
I'm good.
We need two over here.
Sure.
Take one.
Sure.
John, there's,
John put that.
It's there. I have heart too, any extra, if not, I'll have it on my laptop.
Okay, so we did discuss these last, at our December meeting, a fair amount of detail. We've not had any public feedback other than the discussion this evening on the youth league fees. I did want to mention, just to respond to the proposal is to go to $25 per participant, not 45. So just to be clear on that point, which is still considerably less than the high school, which is, I think we can't shut that. Oh, okay, we're not allowed to shut that. Because they're like the high school, the schools.
Right, the schools are at 44, and this would be going to 25.
If I understand correctly, last time you said the reason we were going up is that our cost was even higher than this, right?
Right, so if you take some very broad costs for what we spend on the fields alone, it would come to approximately $38 per person per season. And then again, just going through and looking, again, this hasn't been raised since 2020, so obviously our costs have gone up because we do things for the fields that we don't do for our regular parks and other facilities. So they're mowed more frequently, they get fertilized and things like that, more seed than any other types of locations. Irrigation, this didn't include water, it just included sort of the work that we have to do on the irrigation systems. You know, any additional work that we do to prep or maintain the fields, other than what we get reimbursed. Like for Little League, when Little League pays for our overtime on the weekends when we come in to do it, so that was not included when I calculated into that $38 per person. So we felt we needed to bring this up, and most of the surrounding communities are also around that $25 range. But to your point, we're not even, you know, it's still less than what we would
Right,
spend.
so we're still eating about $13, it sounds like, on the fee.
Approximately, yeah.
Okay. Is there a way, should we consider, you know, if it's 25 per participant, if we have a family of 4 or family of 3, do we draw a line and say it's not going to be $75 for 3, instead it would be X?
Like a
I think,
tiered.
yeah, I think that's harder though. I mean, it's still the wear and tear is a person on the field.
Yeah, it's just the weight that it
the-
puts on a
on the
family, to have
family.
3 kids in Little League or DJFL.
I don't think there's a practical way to,
I don't know how you would,
I don't think
Execute
they
that,
could,
yeah.
they could put that into their, you know, you register a kid and you pay.
right,
I don't, that feels clunky on how they would
right.
pass that
And-
savings on to the family.
And also, just to reiterate too, that this would also take effect in the fall. So it would not be for this, because we know registrations have already, are already in place, so we figured that would start, you'd have plenty of time before doing registration for kind of the fall season, so that would take place then. Yeah, I don't know how you would be able to handle a thing like that.
That's a good question. Is it annual, so is it like $25 per person, per year?
It's per person, per season, that's how we do it now. It's just that it's $5 now, so we're suggesting 25 instead of the 5.
That's the proposal.
And that's the math that you were doing for it, that if you did that, because some, like, we have 2 seasons, baseball has 2 seasons, football, I think, just has
Right.
1. Like, you've done, that's been all adjusted for.
Yeah, basically what we do is when you guys send us the rosters, you know, or we get the rosters and it's the $5 by whatever we did. I use the numbers that we had from the fiscal year 2024. That was the last full year we had. So that's what I used. I kind of calculated it out based on the number of players. And that has always been per person, per season. So some may use us in the fall and the spring, some may only use us in the spring, some may use us only in the fall. So it's whatever that usage is. So if you're gonna use town fields all the time, but say you only use them in the spring, you would pay that once, right, for when they're on the town fields in the spring. So your fall program wouldn't pay us anything if you weren't using town fields in the fall.
I mean, as a practical matter, we're talking about 3 leagues, right? We're talking significant use in both seasons by baseball. We're talking about a little bit of use by soccer in the fall and probably none in the spring.
No, they
And
have
they do
decent
some,
amount.
I mean.
They have a decent amount, yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what they do in response to a 5-fold increase in their fees when because they do prefer to play on turf if they can. So, and then from a football perspective, the reality is the only thing they use is practice time at Holiday. And so there's not a lot of use cases here. It's, in my estimation, vastly punitive to baseball, a little bit to soccer, and a little less to football.
What about lacrosse?
Lacrosse doesn't use that.
Yeah, Board of Ed.
Everybody else wants to play on turf, which is for them.
Jen, do we have written agreements, or what's the extent of the written agreements we have with each of the youth leagues in terms of, for usage of the field, what maintenance items the town is responsible for, what they're responsible for, things of that nature? How?
There is nothing, which is something that is on my list for our new town administrator, that we should have MOUs with every one of the organizations that we work with, whether it's this, whether it's the different youth groups, whether it's the different, you know, the Land Trust, the Friends of Seligwood, any of those organizations that we have, that we've worked with, I think we need to have MOUs in place. Just to for this, you know, and outline exactly what are the different responsibilities of each group. So at the moment, there's nothing in writing.
Because, you know, sort of, when you get a comment, you're saying, well, you know, we don't have use of bathrooms, we don't have this, we don't have that. It sounds like it also varies in terms of, perhaps, what I'm hearing, and this is, I don't want to, that, you know, we may be providing more maintenance services for one sport versus another. So then you would say, well, should that even be the same? It sounds like we don't really
Right, and
have a complete handle on that.
you know, and basically well, I will say baseball, we do line the fields, or we prep the fields during the week. That just falls under us versus, so soccer, they line the fields, right? So that's not a cost on us. Little League, during the week, we mow everybody 2 to 3 times a week versus, like if you were just in a park, we would mow it once a week. So it was for that extra mow time. But baseball fields, we do all the prep and the lining and things like that during the week when it's part of our regular schedule. So there is, in a way, a little bit more that we do with baseball as well. But in football, I guess is similar to soccer where they line the field. You know, so that's not an additional thing for us. Trying to find my breakout of the sports.
How many players in total do you guys have?
It varies by season, but, you know, for spring, for a combination of baseball, softball, and challenger, it's, you know, probably 700,
Okay.
750. There's, you know, and then, you know, there's travel too, but it's usually, it's duplicative of those numbers. Summer, we play some summer ball too, it's a much lower number. And then fall is probably 300.
We're talking with a $20 increase per player on those numbers, $21,000, right around there. I mean, I guess for me, the easiest way to look at this is if we're bringing in $21,000 more revenue here, how much does that offset the overall work that's being done to maintain specifically where we stand on baseball?
Right, we spend about $91,000 on the maintaining the fields.
Okay, so this is helpful, but it
It
doesn't cover
still,
everything.
it still doesn't get
Yeah.
us to cover the cost that we're spending on everything.
Is that, which fields it, that's would be Bavon, Cherry, Baker,
Town hall fields?
and
Those
then.
are-
Town Hall,
Town hall
Holohan.
fields.
And,
Yeah.
oh, and Holohan?
Mhm.
Holohan isn't Little League. but,
Oh, you mean for what
Yeah.
it would pertain for Little League?
yeah, but, yeah, okay, but that,
Yeah,
all
it's
of them
Cherry
are
Lawn,
Holly.
but I'm just, I was just naming all the fields that would fall under this.
I think it's 3 fields. Town Hall, Cherry Lawn, and Woodlawn.
So here. There's 4. There's 4
There's
baseball.
four.
5. And here, right, you do the
There's,
front.
there's
Two
there's
here.
2 at Town Hall,
Big.
there's 3 fields at McGuan, there's 1 at Cherry, there's 1 at Baker.
Right.
And,
Yeah, so 4 locations. 4 parks.
If only we had somebody here who's on the Board of Finance.
Retired from.
Wait a minute. Look way in the back.
John, I mean, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear what your opinion is on this, because it is a tough situation. I understand where parents are and why you guys want to keep costs low, but I also understand the costs associated with maintaining these fields.
Yeah, I mean, listen, my point of view is it's sort of, you know, it's a little dramatic, it's sudden. You know, it's definitely, we kind of compete with other sports in the fact that we have to pay this fee, and I understand the reasons why, but, you know, lacrosse is one of our big competitors for time, and they don't have to pay these fees. I guess they don't use the yields. It's a, you know, it's a competitive disadvantage. You know, we have increased our fees to kind of cover our costs, you know, because of inflation on a variety of things that we cover as well, and we cover all the a lot of the weekend stuff, the overtime. There's also a lot of like maintenance and stuff that we, you know, we don't own the fields, right? We're sort of effectively leasing them, but we put in a lot of maintenance, like, for example, there, you know, the stairs broke at, you know, for the booth at one of the fields at McGuan. You know, we're gonna, you know, fix that, cover that. You know, and again, you know, it's interesting that there's no MOU with Little League, because, you know, we came to this, or I came to this group, and we commissioned, I think, $10,000 or $15,000 as a gift to the town to hire somebody to look into redoing the McGuan Fields and Cherry Lawn, which is what I was alluding to as a multi-$100,000 project. I mean, those fields haven't been done in 30 years. I mean, forget Town Hall, which, you know, is like a disaster, and Baker, which is not great, but like, these fields periodically do need to be redone. They're functionally, they're actually dangerous, and so, you know, we've assumed that that is our responsibility, that while we don't own them, we would, you know, invest money to fundamentally upgrade them. I guess I would just be like a question, like, should we be doing that? Is that actually even, you know, like, isn't that a shared responsibility? You know, CapEx for these fields. I mean, you know, we don't own them. We're leasing them effectively. So, you know, I guess it just, you know, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is we can pay them, we can increase fees on families. You know, I'd also know we give, you know, scholarships to everybody directly. You know, we give scholarships to high school kids. We give scholarships to anybody who asks to play in the town, you know, with no questions asked. So we do a lot to support the community. We've worked in partnership with the town. You all are great partners, to be clear, like from, you know, across the board as a Board of Ed. But, you know, like, you know, I don't, it strikes me as like a kind of sudden change, and it makes me, you know, feel like, wow, now we have to think about deferring, you know, some very needed CapEx on the fields. That seems like a perverse outcome here. So, you know, I don't know. I know you're all looking for money, and we're a source of money theoretically, but it seems a little dramatic and disproportionate, and a little out of sync with kind of the nature of the relationship we've had.
Jenny?
At the Board of Finance meeting last night, Jen Chernesky reported that you all are on track to generate about $280,000 in net operating revenue from your programming. So when you're talking about structuring your program fees to basically budget for ongoing, the programming should pay for not only itself, but for your ongoing maintenance costs. So how do your programming fees, if you're generating a surplus of almost 280,000, how does that fit in? What's the goal of raising fees on the field use on top of the programming fees? I thought the programming fees were sort of, that maintenance is already baked into your pricing. So how do you explain it?
So the programming money is really basically on the programs. It really does not offset the cost for the maintenance of all the facilities. To some extent, it does cross over, but when we're setting the fees for that, it does not take into account, oh, well, for the fields, you know, I mean, it could be a cooking class. It has nothing to do with any use of fields or something like that. So it's really not tying over. I think, I hate to say it, but this goes back to the financial sustainability strategy that we're looking to hopefully get money for. And that will actually be able to show us, this is going to be it's in our capital budget request. And it would take us through a process to be able to show exactly what we're spending and what we're recovering, our cost recovery on all of these different things. And I'm sure that we will show that even with fields and a lot of our maintenance and things, that we're not coming anywhere close to the cost, and I'm sure it's far more than $38 a player that we're actually spending. So they're kind of two different things, but that, if we go through that, that will also help us in terms of setting our pricing for our programs as well.
And that's
so.
$38 per person
Per
per
season.
use.
Per season.
Per
Not per
season.
season. So
Per season. This, for the youth leagues, it's per season. It was based on 2,359 players, which was what we had in 2024.
Do we know what our costs are and how those align to $58 beach permits?
Nope.
Do we know how our $5 an hour we get for tennis courts aligns to the cost to support tennis?
No,
So
And-
why are we splitting hairs on baseball?
it's not on baseball. It's on all of our field use, and it's for all the groups that pay that. And this is something that we know that we're seriously undercharging for. You know, I mean, it said everybody's costs have gone up. Well, so have our costs have gone up for our staff costs, for all the material costs, all of that. So that's all gone up for us as well.
I'm with you. I guess what I'm suggesting is, and this is my first time through one of these budget processes, there's a bunch of numbers that jumped off the page at me.
Yep.
One was we collected $10,000 for pickleball fees. The other was we collected $1,000 for tennis fees. So our costs don't really align to anything on this sheet. And I'm wondering why we're focusing on athletic fees this year before we go through a process to align all of it.
I think one of the balancing acts, and we talked about this a little bit last month when Jen was describing this program that we're hoping to get funding, is the first is to truly understand our costs to deliver all the different services throughout the park system. The second piece of that will be for us to determine a framework for given recreational opportunities we provide to the community, how much of those costs we want to recover with user fees versus taxes. And that's really the balance here when you think about maintaining the fields for the youth sports. Are those costs that all of the taxpayers in Darien should be absorbing a piece in? Because we think it's great for Darien to have a really robust Little League, which I think we all do. I know my son certainly loved it. Or is that something that the users of that program should be covering the costs, or somewhere in the middle? And we've really never, to be honest, had those discussions. And I said this last month, and I'll say it again, when Jen came in and interviewed with us, this is one of the things we talked about. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level.
And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level.
And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think it's what we need to do to kind of bring us to that next level. And I think you know, to be more disciplined about really understand, you know, what is it, you know, what does it cost us to really run the beaches? And again, the beaches are open to all town residents, but all of those things, so I think there's a lot of work we're gonna be able to roll up our sleeves and do if we're able to get the approval of this capital project. If we don't, we're gonna have to look at other ways to get there, but it'll be harder. But so that's kind of, you know, that's the balance. And I think when Jen made the proposal, she was looking at the fact that, you know, the high school or the schools are charging considerably more than we are and whatever, so it was a little bit of that equalization. But if people feel we're not ready, that we need to do homework, we could do a smaller interim step while we really dig into this and develop our philosophy. We can go really any number of ways on this.
Well, it was my understanding from the meeting last time that you had done a review of all the fees that are on this schedule. Not
We looked
only
at all the ones
for-
on here,
on the-
yes.
Not only for the youth league fees, and some had not been increased 11 years, or 12 years at this point. And then I think we also discussed, in this, I think we had this discussion last time, was doing something incremental, like don't go up to 25, but maybe.
Right, we could
and I'm
do
just-
maybe 10 this
10,
year.
like $15 and then 25.
Right.
And that would give people ease of mind in terms of increasing the fees. And then perhaps 2 years from now, when you have your sustainability model, you could take this information and put it in there and determine if it needs to go further. But it's also my understanding the increase in fees here doesn't really have anything to do with paying for programming. It's field usage and maintenance and paying for the humans and the staff to get that done. But you're paying staff to run the programs separately.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct, and
Mhm.
this is for what we do on the field surfaces
Right.
above and beyond what we would do if they were not being maintained as just grass areas or something like that.
Yeah.
So because we're using them for sport, it's got a higher level of use and care and materials and that. So it's to make up that difference. But yes, it is possible, like I said, if we wanted to ease into it, we could break it down and do it incrementally and maybe not do as big of a jump this year, and try to ease into it.
Again, it feels like if the study about aligning costs to fees is something we're gonna invest in, and yeah, that not only is data that will inform this, but it also feels like it's a pretty drastic departure from how fees and budgets have been set from this board before. So it's not just data, like if we're really gonna adopt those, because I think if anything's coming out is that some fees are more profitable than others and they all subsidize one another a little bit, meaning beach doesn't align to beach, programs don't align to programs, tennis doesn't align to, like, and what it feels like we're saying, and a lot of that goes, and I'm not somebody who says, let's do it the way we always did. It's that-
Nor am I.
But it seems like we're picking out one line item to do that and saying we'll figure out the rest later. And I just, and if on one hand, if we need to do that, we need to do that, but let's be very clear what it is. It's a tax flowing through to a subset of sports families, which is baseball at the most, soccer in the middle, and a little, you know, I don't know what football's gonna do, but I know if I was on the football board, I would say I don't need, I can spend $2,500 to practice at Holihan. I don't need to spend $15,000 to practice at Holihan. That's what I would do, and just jam everybody in the board that. And the reality is this, the arc of this conversation was a month ago, we were talking about moving it to 45 because we can.
No, I never said 45.
No.
It was always
So it
25.
was 25.
I never
It
said
was not
$45.
Yeah.
Never.
That's what I
Is it because of the
understood.
two seasons that potentially ends up being
Maybe it's
50
maybe it was 50 a
for
player for 2
50,
seasons.
yeah, for the whole year?
That might have been
But
what you were
that's-
thinking.
But again,
It was,
yeah, I mean, that's gonna flow through to those families, and if we have to get it, we have to get it, but that's what we're talking about.
yeah.
So,
Okay. So, we need to narrow it down, because we need to vote on our fee schedule tonight, so. I'll certainly entertain if somebody wants to put a motion on the table to regard to any change to, why don't we stick with the youth league fees for the moment, and then we can certainly have to talk about any others.
I mean, if we vote on this now, this is codified that this is going up in the spring of 2020, well, in the fall of 2025.
The fall of 2025.
And in regards to the other fees that are in the 2025 column, when would those start?
Now.
Irregardless of the youth, like,
Now,
so if they're
so for
approved
this
tonight.
summer, the upcoming beach stickers, these would be the fees, or any of the other fees, they would go into effect once approved.
Okay.
But many of these they're very seasonal.
Right.
Yeah.
Most of them are
Okay.
seasonal.
Well, and I guess,
Really,
the
except
one
for
thing I would say,
paddle tennis.
I would say paddle tennis would be next paddle season, they wouldn't be
Right.
this, they would start in the fall, so that should be,
Yeah, for
start
instance,
of the next.
paddle tends to be higher because they're absolutely more expenses. We have, the courts are heated, you've got the propane, you have an attendant, you've got the fire pit, you know, the paddle hut is kept open for just general usage, so, I mean, absolutely, it makes sense that paddle fee is more expensive because the offering is quite different than just a tennis court or pickleball court. Pickleball is a little bit of sort of a supply and demand to, you know, really lock in, and because people wanted to make reservations. But we probably need to be looking at that again. Yes, John?
Can we-
Yeah, a couple things. It strikes me that, you know, we've struggled with user-based fees across all parts of town government for as long as I've been doing this. And there really hasn't been anything that sort of codifies what our point of view and strategy is in such a way that it's almost a quantitative approach to setting fees, or formulaic in nature, as opposed to kind of subjective, which is what this and lots of similar efforts feel like. So maybe to some of these points, maybe what you could do is take a step back and say, all right, let's try to write down what our philosophy is for this, and plagiarize for other towns. I mean, you gotta have something for Westport where they thought through this, and I certainly could ask a lot of other towns how they think about this and what their philosophy is, and then come to a point of view that says, we're going to do this in terms of things that qualify for user fees and things that don't. We're going to do this in terms of, say, percentage of cost we want to cover, or have a formula that says something to that effect. So when it comes to setting these fees, there's less subjectivity in doing that. The other thing I would say is, in response to some of the comments, anything that entails kind of a departure from what we did before, and therefore a big increase, that ought to be layered in over time. I mean, it's not to say that maybe they should or should not pay more money. I don't know, I don't have the facts on that. But whatever the decision is, if it's a significant increase, then just to bring some stability to their financial life, to say, all right, we're going to layer this in over time so that there's not a shocking increase year over year. I think that's a very fair comment. So I would urge you to consider those two things.
John, if I can just chime in, because what you were saying, that your first point is exactly what the financial sustainability strategy is all about. All of that comes out of that. It's figuring out what the philosophy is, what pays, what the cost recovery should be. So
And so is
that's,
some of the aggressiveness on this premature? So in other words,
I don't think so. You know, again, I think if we wanted to scale it back, and for this one, especially for this one in particular, most of this is just trying to cover the increase in cost increases that we've had over the last number of years. But I think in terms of the fees, I don't think so. I think we'll see that it theoretically should be higher, even higher than this. So I think especially if we were to cut it back and kind of ease into it and cut it, you know, not do a $20 increase, but do something lower, would not be ahead of the game or not be premature. I think it's just leading into it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I like the idea of layering it in, like John said, but, I mean, I hate to see kids have to choose sports. I'll play baseball, but I can't play football because the fees are what they are. What if we were to look at some of the adult fees, like the paddle and pickleball and tennis, and if we took them up by $5, could that offset some of the cost for the
Well, I
youth
think-
leagues?
But I think then you're doing it, probably not the right word, but haphazardly, just trying to recover, instead of doing it where the user is using it.
Well, I understand.
Well, that
but-
comes down to
So-
the philosophy, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I think
Right.
at some point, depending on the programming and the activity, there will be some flow back and forth, right? It's some supplementation that has to happen between
Right.
activities just as a whole for the betterment of the town and the offering, or the, variety of the offering. So maybe we probably do need to kind of look at it holistically.
I mean, when you think about the budget we approved, which is largely an expense budget, we didn't add, there were no new initiatives in there. We didn't request any additions to staff. It was really what Jen said, this is what we need to continue to maintain the parks at the level we want to maintain them. And we'll go through that, and we're going to be starting the discussions with the selectmen in a few weeks. And costs have gone up, we all know that. And it's like, this is what's cost. So it's really then, we don't fully offset the expense to run the parks, by definition, by the fees we charge. So it's really then how much of the selectmen and the Board of Finance and the RTM going to be looking at us to try to chip away at the percentage increase we need to continue to maintain the parks? Or are they gonna say, you can't maintain them to that level, you can't plant as many new trees when trees have died, you can't take down as many invasives, whatever, you can't pay, you gotta cut back on the overtime or whatever. There wasn't anything like new and different. I mean, there were no new, it's keeping doing what we're doing is really what the proposed budget reflects, and Jen's best estimate of what those costs are gonna be next year. So it really gets down to, it's gonna be what the selectmen and the Board of Finance are comfortable with, and how much they say, well, if you raise these, some of these user fees, well then your net increase is gonna be less than whatever. So that's really what it's gonna come down to, is how much were we trying. I think that was the discussion. I know Ed isn't here, I think he missed the last meeting as well, but I remember a couple of meetings ago, he was, advocating against, really keeping our expense increases to a bare minimum unless we could offset them for fees. So that's just a counterpointing philosophy, if I remember his thought process correctly.
Well, I would say in response to that, I'm very motivated to preserve youth sports. That's why a lot of people live here, they love it. We have exceptional programs at our schools. These are NFL quality facilities, it's really remarkable. And so I think people are motivated to continue that tradition here in town, and I think we should be accommodating of that. I think, therefore, kind of dialing back how we maintain these fields and trying to pinch pennies in that regard, I'm philosophically opposed to that. We have a tight budget, but it's Darien, we're not broke, and so it's okay to spend some money to maintain these facilities to the standards that I think we expect, and that parents expect, players expect, these folks expect. That's okay. I think the decision as to whether to collect the money from taxpayers to pay for all this, or divide it between taxpayers and users, and to kind of figure all that out, I think we need to do that thoughtfully, but there's not a huge urgency to change our current formula. There's no emergency that says we have to do this right now. I think it'd be much better to take a step back, like this plan effort that you're describing, let that unfold, where you guys can come to a consensus that says philosophically, this is where we are on all these dimensions. And it's going to mean some significant changes, and here's our view as to how you layer that in over time, so that everybody can look at that and say, yeah, I understand the philosophy, that makes sense, and I understand how the economics are going to flow from that philosophy over some reasonable period of time.
Does anyone have any challenges or discussion that they'd like to put forward on any of the other fees other than youth league?
Everybody, I'll just,
So then I would be open to make a motion to do two things. One, I think we're all in agreement on the idea of a tiered increase system over time. I think that 100% increase from 5 to 10 is still significant, with the idea that long-term it may continue to go up. So, you know, with the verbal understanding that we're good with a $10 per participant, yes, fee per season, I would make the motion then to vote on the other proposed fees in the 25 schedule.
So I'm sorry, support the fee schedule as is with that one edit.
That one edit,
So instead of 25, it would be 10?
yes.
And effective for the fall season. And we should probably also say the paddle tennis for the fall. You see.
Yes.
I have one question or suggestion, and I don't know if this is the case or not, but the boat launching permit, it used to be, and it certainly could have changed, a lot of boats would be launched before Memorial Day. So if there was no one at the gate, I don't even know if a lot of people know that to basically launch their boat, they're supposed to pay that fee. I don't know, I could be wrong. But that might be one area where you either increase that or figure out a way to, you know, if someone's gonna launch their boat in the beginning of May, I highly doubt they're coming to pay the $50. I don't know. I don't know what you do about that, but I just remember between the yacht club and the boat club, you know, most boats are in the water before Memorial Day. Just take that information.
That's true.
I think that's a great point. But since we don't have a solution in, you know, set up tonight to address that situation, I would still continue to stick where it is, and I think that longer term is something that we can continue to look into.
I did actually ask the Commodore of the boat club whether he had a sense of how many people were using the ramp. This was in the context of discussion about the Pear Tree project, using the ramp to launch their boats seasonally versus having them brought in. And he actually thought that a fairly large proportion of the boat club members, they're storing their boats over at all seasons in Rowayton or whatever, and the boats are being driven in by water and not being launched by the boat.
Okay.
He didn't think that, because yes, you're right, in other words, they're coming in before we have the guard on Memorial Day, the boats are getting launched and they're pulling them after the guy leaves and they're just not paying it. He certainly couldn't say it's 100%, I'm sure there are some of the members who do that, but he didn't think it was as large a proportion as I thought it might be. He felt that most of the boats actually come in by water from other towns.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've been aware that that was a loophole per se.
One thing that would be helpful would be to have a column here for the last fiscal year, what was the total revenue raised for each one of these fees? And then to rank them in that priority so that we'd get a sense for just what sort of dollar value we're looking at for each one of these.
Okay, so we have an amended proposal on the table.
That makes sense.
Okay. Resolved that the Parks and Recreation Commission approves the 2025 fee schedule as proposed with change of youth league to $10 and with youth league and paddle tennis fees to take effect for the fall 2025 season.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So
Second.
second. You are the proposer.
Yes.
And Mary was second. Okay, is there any more discussion? No, everybody, okay, all in favor? Okay, opposed? Okay. Thank you. Okay, next thing on the agenda is the discussion of our establishment and membership of the 2025 advisory groups. Included in your packet was the document from 2024. And, you know, as we've evolved during the year and talked about different things, it seems like probably some changes to these, or not changes, but sort of refinements to these could be made. The first one that we've had was the pickleball advisory group. Jim and John and I met, just in December, Jen, to talk about pickleball and really floated the idea, thank you, of rebranding this rather than just pickleball, but to a racket sports advisory group, for instance, so that we're really thinking about all the racket sports and everything around them and understanding, you know, the usage of each and the demand and whatever. So that was certainly one thing that we had talked about. So we wanted to get other people's thoughts on that as a possibility to adjust this a little bit so it's not, and also then it's less kind of pitting one sport against the other, which has been one of the challenges with pickleball versus tennis, is to really think about all the racket sport users' needs.
Put together one committee that would address all paddle, racket, et cetera, and come up with one solution for all those sports. And it'd be a mix, so everybody on the committee could be a mix of tennis, paddle, pickleball users.
It could be also talking for going forward, again, you know, we just touched on, you know, fees and why do we charge this for pickleball versus tennis, and, you know, is the tennis reservation the right setup? Like, because we do it one way for pickleball, we do it another way for tennis, whatever, thinking about lessons and the demand that they create on the court usage and whatever. So just being a little bit more holistic about it, I think, might make sense. So if people like that idea, Jim, I'll work with you to update the proposed charge for the year.
Okay.
You know, and get it, and then also think about membership. I know that Ed wanted to join.
Right.
So I think we would add Ed, and other commission members would like to.
Yeah, the only thing I might suggest is an aspiration date for having recommendations back to the commission. So not something that takes years, but something a little more speedy.
Right, so as of right now, it would be Ed and I, and if anyone else would like to join, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we're gonna pull together a committee of, you know, townsfolk who evenly spread around among pickleball, paddle, and tennis.
Okay. So people are comfortable with that? Okay, we'll work on that. The next two, we've got the Cherry Lawn Community Garden Advisory Group, and then following that, we've had the Invasives Advisory Group. And what Jen and I talked a little bit about, and then I mentioned to Mary Louise, was perhaps, I'm not coming up with the name I want yet, but combining those, but then expanding it to have more to do with
Trees.
the grounds, like groundskeeping. I need the right word, somebody's gotta come up with it for me, but the idea of really, like, not just the invasives, but also where are we replanting? We've got a tree budget, where do we wanna put the trees? Where do we want to use our beautification dollars? And then we could fold the community gardens oversight under this group, so we have one group instead of two. But just really anything in terms of the, sort of the is it beautification? No, it's not really beautification. You guys get what I'm getting at, and we need the right words for it, which will either come to me in the middle of the night or somebody's gonna, we don't work on this. But the idea of it's really just one advisory group that's really thinking about sort of our natural environment in terms of both invasives, replaces, whatever, as opposed to having something that's just solely focused on invasives. I think that was great initially, because we needed to get our arms around it. I think Sandy, when we did the parks tour, he was all right identifying areas that Weed Beach. He said, you know what, we're gonna tackle these invasives next. I know he's thinking about it out in the park, so I don't think it's as much as when it was this kickoff, where we had to prioritize. But we still know we have a lot of budget dollars around different pieces of remediation, as well as beautification and planting.
One of the things I mentioned in my State of the Town was I think a collective need for all of us to get a better handle on the environmental policy and strategy of the town. And part of the problem we have right now is that you've got multiple groups, say the invasives groups in Parks and Rec, and we've got sustainability, and then we've got coastal advisory, and then we've got different groups that just have a different focus on this. And so as a result, we don't have a cohesive approach to this. And so one of the things I'm going to try to work out this year is an answer to that question, which is could we do a better job kind of pulling all that together in one umbrella that's more focused and mission-driven, that could conceivably cover something like this. So one of the things we might want to think about is this something that you'd like to outsource, say, to a town board or commission on that that's focused on environmental matters? Or is it something that you'd want to keep inside Parks and Rec or somehow linked with that? But in any case, I'm obviously not going to oppose anything, but I will keep this board or commission apprised of that conversation. And if there's a way to maybe integrate that or draw on the, whatever we come up with, to provide guidance for what you're talking about, because reasonably what you do on invasives, it's really not going to work unless we do it on all town properties, on
Right.
Great Island and Highland Farms and things that
Yep.
are not within your purview.
Yep.
I'd love to have all that done in a more cohesive way.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I mean, you know, we talked about, you know, when trees, and we lose trees in the parks just because they fall down. We've lost quite a few this year. And, you know, I think as a group, we've agreed that we want to make sure for every tree we lose, we're at least replacing one on one, if not 2 or 1 or 3 on 1. But, you know, if the town has sort of develops an overall philosophy about, you know, tree replacement or net increase to the number of trees, we should definitely be participating, you know, in that. You know, in the meanwhile, I think we need to be thinking about, as we have these dollars, you know, where are we going to put our beautification dollars in terms of, you know, we can plant more, repair a tree like we did one year. We said, okay, that's a priority because we heard loud and clear from the public that, you know, pear tree needed some love aesthetically or whatever. So we do need, you know, guys to be thinking about that. But the larger picture of sort of being environmental stewards in the parklands, I think there's absolutely linkage to whatever you develop.
And maybe it's a person from our group sits on whatever the larger town group, you know, so the information comes back to this commission. You know,
Something like that.
or it gets fed both ways, so they would be one seat at the table.
But I mean, it does make a lot of sense, you're right, because it feels like people are going off in a lot of different,
You know, what I would do in the
Directions
meantime
right
is
now.
not let you distract from keeping that effort moving forward. I think you've done a lot of really good work on that. But over the course of this year, let's see how that goes. Because by the time you get to this point next year, maybe there's a town solution that you can attach yourselves to
Right.
that provide the
Right.
guidance on these things that's done consistently across town.
and then we might not need a separate advisory group, but the scope would be very different or just much more
But
specific.
to Jen's point, maybe just a member of this commission as part of that.
Right.
And it's somebody who's on that group, because they can feed back the information.
Yep. Okay. All right, so we're working on that, but I need somebody to come up with a snappy name. Okay.
Snappy committee.
Snappy committee. Groundskeeping, flora and fauna, got tons of, something, we'll come up with it, okay.
Landscaping.
Yes, I thought about that, but that sounds like mowing the lawn. We'll come up with it. It's gonna come to me.
Sustainability.
Yeah, it's gonna come to me. Okay, now Baker Park, do we still need that, Jen? Because, Jen, your group's work is done.
Yes, I mean, we've provided the recommendation and
Right.
from what I understand,
It's
it's
coming.
It's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming, I'll share that in the
Yeah.
next
Okay.
item.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
that
that
can be-
one, we can vote probably next month when we kind of get this buttoned up, just to disband, to formally disband that one. Okay. The only thing just popped, could be a bad idea, just shut me up. It popped into my head, we had that discussion, would be there any reason to have an athletic fields advisory group or somebody as like, I mean, one thing, when the gentlemen were here, they talked about the fact that they came to us, offered to donate a considerable amount of money to redo the fields at McGuan. We went out to bid, the bids came in very high, and the whole thing just stopped. And that was when Pam was still here, so that's been over a year now, and I kind of went, you know, quite, I know Terry and I talked to you about that when you joined the commission,
Yeah.
that we just,
They,
and what I'm hearing is, well, we do this and we do that, and maybe there's not a clear enough understanding about who's doing what for whom and what the expectations are.
so unpacking that, so, but not to speak for them, but my understanding is, you know, they want to invest significant, like into like, major renovations in the field, leveling them, that sort of thing. And their view of that go-round when the numbers came in, that was more a time-driven thing. It was one of those times where they were late to the game, so if they're more ahead of it, the price goes down. So they said, we'll just wait another year. So there's, I believe the intention is still, or the desire and the money is still there to do that. But you know, the financial feasibility of that, but they were assuming all things good, but there's an appetite to continue to do that, I believe.
So maybe we really just need a liaison there, just somebody, I'm looking at you, because you've been doing that for us,
I'm
it's
happy
just
to-
somebody who, rather than having a group that has to meet more meetings, that you can just be that liaison and continue those discussions about, you know, how and when, but I'd like to delve into this more in terms of sort of the comments about, you know,
Partnership.
Yeah, I mean,
who owns what, are they happy with the quality of the fields, or or is there something that they feel they're not what they want? I mean, I think that, and then that would get into developing these MOUs in terms of really understanding what services are being delivered, what's on us, what's on them,
Right.
what, you know, sort of quality of field they're looking for versus what we're providing. I just think we need to ramp up those conversations, make
And
them
then-
more regular.
the other narrative that probably belongs in there is, I'm not 100% sure this, John, maybe you know, is I think the children in school projection is in a lull and expected to go back up again over the next decade, I think. So
Maybe.
I know we're down in terms of the number of children in the schools at the moment, and I thought it was, but that may impact field usage is my point. So there was a period of time where, you know, some of these sports that use the town fields were really, really using them a lot, and they're using them less just because the leagues are a little smaller at the moment. But I thought the projection was that that goes back up again at some point in the next decade.
Even with all
but
the new
maybe-
housing in town?
That could be, that could be.
Not true, actually. If you look at, for example, Darien Commons, which I think had 165 units there.
Not a lot of kids.
The net addition of the town, to the school district of town was 5. And part of the reason is these are 1 and 2-bedroom apartments, they're not large enough for families.
Yeah.
There's only one place you could get a 3-bedroom apartment, and that's at Avalon, and that's, you know, corporate relocations, people who are tearing down their houses and live here anyway, or they're frankly divorced dads.
I mean, John gave us the Little League number of 700. 6 years ago, that was 1,000. So there are a lot more games at Town Hall. You know, baseball uses Town Hall a lot. So my point is, whatever the trend is on that usage, that would indicate where we have work to do. And there's a longer term discussion on that as well.
Well, wouldn't that information go in your sustainability plan? I mean, that's kind of things that basic usage and projection out, that even for the master plan for the parks, that is,
I think it's
would
more,
be valuable
I think it's more
information.
master plan than in the sustainability,
Okay.
that's more of a philosophy,
Mhm.
and, it comes into play a little bit, but it's really more of the philosophy of how you want to recoup the money, like at what levels.
Okay.
Okay, so any other, I don't think at the moment there's really anything else. If we are successful in getting Wheat Beach and/or Pear Tree off the ground, building committees will be formed, and those are formed by the selectmen, not by us. They are actually a committee of the Board of Selectmen. But typically, a member of the commission would be one, at least, you know, we would have at least one member on the building committee would be typical, based on past practice, so would we
One
need to
thing
think
to
about
just,
who would
add to
represent
that.
us?
I've sent out a note to board chairs, including Lori and others, to help kind of answer questions and pre-qualify both the Wheat Beach project and the Pear Tree Point. We're gonna set up tours for both those properties. It's probably gonna be on Saturday, February 1st. Looks like that's a reasonable date to try, and given the number of people we're inviting, it's impossible to get it aligned with everybody's calendars. Or we're gonna treat it like they do the school tours, and basically start at 10 in the morning at Wheat Beach and migrate over to Pear Tree Point, and just take the key folks who are gonna be involved in the decision process, so Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, RTM subcommittees, others. We'll have Dan Biggs come. You guys, if you're available, any and all of you are welcome, but part of the reason I want to do this is to get those decision makers out to the properties, to see them, see what's being proposed, have a chance to ask questions. We'll have Dan Biggs there for both sessions. I'd like to get Greg Flaherty over to Pear Tree Point, just so we can answer questions with regard to the flooding imperative. But the idea would be that after this, a lot of these questions are answered, and it'll make the budget process discussion just a lot easier.
Assuming we're successful, you know, I think it's correct, John, that we would have representation from the commission on those building committees.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so.
I know where you all live.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying in terms of, you know, assigning people to working groups, and I don't want to create a lot of different advisory groups because we're going to need manpower to represent on those projects if we're
Well,
successful.
you'll need someone there just to report back,
Right,
excuse me, to the
Yeah.
commission about what's going on.
right, right. So, all right, so we'll leave it that. I'll be working with Mary Louise, Jim, and Jen on tightening up these charges, and then we can look at that, finalizing those next month. Okay, Jen, your report.
Okay. Well, you touched on, Weed Beach is in as part of our capital plan. Pear Tree is also in as part of the capital plan, but one of the big things is we will be going to planning and zoning on Tuesday night, the 21st, for a public hearing on that, so hopefully we will be getting approvals, or hope if all goes smoothly sometime in February, that we would get that approval, and then we'd be able to start going out to bid, so that the placeholder that we have in the capital budget, by the time we get further down the road, we'll have an actual number, with the thought that we would begin construction right after Labor Day. And it'll take us through probably mid-July in 2026 is sort of the thought. Our ARPA updates, very exciting. Holohan, the backstop, they started, and then I think it got so cold they stopped. We have a part of the bottom has been removed, so they're ready to go. They have all the materials, so they'll be back. That'll be happening. They do have their end date is like mid-March, so that we know for April 1, that's good to go. Also, I met with the installer for the Baker Park Playground. They will be delivering everything on Friday. So that's exciting, and he's planning on just getting going as soon as it's here. So weather dependent, obviously, other than if it's raining. We were out there, I was frozen, so I don't know how they're gonna do it. I was like, how do you do this with, I'm like, my hands, I can't feel them, so. Some of the demolition and stuff is easy to understand, but, so that's moving along. Did have our initial meeting with John and also Jen Chinesky, the town administrator, on the budget.
Sorry, real quick.
Yep.
Did he mention what the downtime would be for the park? For
Well,
Baker?
I mean, it sounds very quick, quite honestly. So, I mean, we should be all set by spring, unless we get hit with
Yeah.
snow, tons of snow, or heavy rain that he can't work in.
Yeah.
I think it will be.
That's the
fairly-
good thing about mulch. Like, one of the other surfacing options required, like, the ground not to be frozen, so.
Right, right, and you needed certain temperatures to be able to pour stuff, so we don't have that, that issue, so we should be, you know, I would think by springtime, you know, when the weather turns, it should be ready to go and usable, so, so that's good. So we met on the budget, obviously what we had done here, and just going back, Jen is making final touches on that. We had some little tweaks, but not too much, not much at all, actually. One of the things that we did have was pulling the tree replacement, the tree plantings, taking that out and putting that in as a capital line. So we took that money out and just moved it over. And then the one thing is that there were two projects moving the wall at Cherry Lawn and also the pond dredging out 1 year. Most of that is really based on the Cherry Lawn Pond. That's really based on just bandwidth for staff, because if we have pear tree going and weed going, and then it was felt that we needed to do Tilly first in terms of dredging, because of, number one, the safety issue, you know, the blue-green algae is you know, actually is toxic. Also, the odors, and we get calls out that it impacts the fire department because they get calls because people think it's gas, gas breaks, and it's also, you know, part of the infrastructure with the catch basins and things like that. So the thought is to keep that in for this year, push the other one out. And part of the reasoning for the wall is that looking to do the traffic study as soon as we can. But if that section, we don't know, that might get impacted. So why rebuild that if it may need to get moved or adjusted in some way when we go to do whatever changes we're gonna make. So those were the only things that really came up in that. As you know, as you saw in there, our fall 2024 and the winter 2025 participation numbers are up. So that's good. The one thing that is down is our paddle court usage and revenue. So that's down quite a bit. It's down about $10,000 from where we were last year. We're seeing the difference in the weekday, really the weekday use. The evenings and weekend morning plays are still really busy, and that 6th court is impact, and I think some of it may actually kind of still be kind of the COVID changeover, with so many people that were here and were around, because the evenings and the weekends are still, weekend mornings are still very busy. So those are packed. So I think that's what we're kind of seeing, and the thought there may also be some people doing more play at clubs and things like that versus or our courts.
Is $10,000 significant on a percentage? Sounds like
Well,
it
I
is.
mean, it's a number that kind of pops out when we're seeing it, you know, but it's down, what, 16%? A little more than 16, so that's, but actually the numbers I've seen so far are all kind of from COVID levels, where it really peaked, because then they were in huge demand because everybody was around, outdoor stuff was all you could do, so those courts were packed from what I've been told, like basically every minute of every day, and people were home, so they take their break during the day and they go and they play. So I think that's why we're seeing kind of the difference in the weekday.
It's almost the conference at the train station, which, you know, very gradually, now when you drive by the train station, the lot's pretty full again, so I think a lot of people who were working at home, you're right, could sneak out for an hour and get a game, and where now they're back in the city or back at the office. And don't have those flexibilities.
So we did start a new program, I think our squash program with Ox Ridge, and that actually was doing really well. So we're including more in our spring, summer, and we'll plan to expand that again in the fall. Just in terms of some of our events, in Old Fashioned Holiday, we had that on December 7th. Thank you to those that helped out and attended. It was fun, it was great. I think it had a good turnout, and people really enjoyed it. We had the ice sculptor for the first time actually doing it right there. The only thing is, I think everybody thought it was gonna happen like that. It took, I think, an hour and a half to do it. But he had a good crowd, so that was fun. We had food trucks, and this year we added vendors. So people seem to have a good time. We're currently working on our spring, summer brochure. That registration will begin on February 26th. All the information should be online by the 21st, and we're expecting the brochure to be out by the week of February 17th. So that's busy. Everybody's been busy working on all that, getting all the programs lined up.
And Cassie wants our picture tonight, so before
Yes.
everybody leaves, she wants a picture of the commission for the brochure.
Tonight?
Tonight. It was in the email. It was in the email. Fair warning.
We're currently taking applications for lifeguards. Word has gone out to them, so we know, they're getting back to us with who's coming back. So we're getting ready to get fully geared up. In terms of the facilities and maintenance, just some of the seasonal things is, we've already been out working on we haven't had to plow yet, but we've had to go out and, put down salt, things like that, or blow off walkways and paddle courts, things like that. So all the snow blowers, plows, everything's ready to go and have been in use. Staff are starting their process of going through and doing their yearly, at this time of year, they take the time, they go through all of the equipment, they maintain it. That's why we're lucky that it lasts as long as it does, because they take very good care of it. So they're in the process of doing that. Also, in the next few weeks, they're starting to do all their maintenance on swim lines and buoys and lifeguard chairs and the teak benches. We bring them in and sand and stain and things like that. So they're busy working at that. We've also trimmed the trees behind the community gardens, so that has been done. There will be more tree work to happen starting at Cherry Lawn. Also, that flagpole was fixed. Yeah, so just wanted to share that. And then one of the other things that you probably have heard about at some point in time, but back on December 1st, there was a large sewer break down at Weed Beach. So if you see the area, because that was contaminated, that's been treated, and more work will happen. That's DPW is taking care of that, but that'll happen when the ground thaws and they'll be able to go in there. And then just some of our soon-to-be upcoming events are January 31st, we're having Some Plus One Fun Night. That's a new event. That'll be happening here in the gym. If you want to sign up and help out, that's fine. Cassie, I'm sure, would love to have the help. Basically, it's going to be just all sorts of games and activities and things for the kids to also help for, we have the daughter duo dance, which is on February 7th. So this was kind of, have the boys and have the girls. We have to do something for the boys. So we've got that going. And then Adventure Day, we're getting ready for that, which will be May 18th. So again, we'll be looking for volunteers for that. But those are the most upcoming things that are in the nearest of the future. So that's what I've got.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions for Jen? I don't have too much that hasn't been touched on. The Great Island Committee has been very active and busy, right through the holidays. Currently working on fine-tuning the vision statement. We had one meeting on it last week. It was last week. Got feedback of some initial drafts, and now a kind of a fine-tuned draft has been out and circulated. We'll be discussing that at our meeting next week. Coastal Commission has not met since November, maybe? A while. So nothing to report on there. John mentioned the Weed Beach and Pear Tree tours on February 1st. The P&Z hearing I was going to mention is next Tuesday, January 21st. That'll be one of several meetings on Pear Tree. It doesn't all happen in one night, but that's a key date.
What was the date?
Tuesday, January 21st. It was 7:30, 8?
I think it's 7.
7? Okay. Dan will be coming down and making a presentation on that. On that, we'll be taking any public comment. It's Tuesday, 21st, next Tuesday.
You have a Board of Selectmen meeting, no? Okay.
And the selectmen have set their budget review schedule, and Parks and Rec is on their agenda for February 3rd, which is a Monday. So that's when they will be going through our proposed budgets in some level of detail, asking questions, whatever. So certainly I'll be there, Jen will be there, and to the extent you guys want to be there to participate, support, you are always welcome. So going into a pretty busy meeting schedule for the next couple of months, which first quarter always seems to be, just like when I was working. And that is it. That's all I've got tonight. Any questions? Any new business anyone wants to bring forward? Absent getting our picture taken, I think we are ready to take a motion to adjourn. Okay. Jim, Mary Louise second, all in favor? Okay. Where would you like to stand? This is happy. I don't know. Good spot. Oh, let's